Welcome back, everyone, to R2Kast number 82. I'll introduce you to who we have on in a minute. I always like to say sort of who was last and who was next week. And I don't think it could be more topical than ever before. Last week we had Michael Blanche, who was talking about how to get into farming, how to find a way onto the farming ladder. And he is a Nuffield scholar with his scholarship called the Farming Ladder. He travelled to Cambodia, India, New Zealand, France, and the States, I believe it was, to sort of see the troubles different farmers the world over had in getting tenancies and buying land. Next week, I have someone that I'm quite sure a lot of people in this call, of which we have 7 others, by the way, will have heard of, is Mr. Charles Dowding. So somewhat of the, I don't know what you're seeing. I'm recording this slightly different. I don't know if you can just see me at the minute or if you can see all of us. We'll see when it comes out in a video. And if you can see all of us, I just look very silly at the minute. Everyone looks quite excited with Charles Dowding coming on. So yeah, the sort of father of no dig. We've got people dancing and very excited with this. So it was very interesting. Very much one of those discussions where I spent an hour not knowing a thing about what we were talking about. So all good fun in general. But today we have the Regenerative Farming Network of Southwest Scotland, which I think I've said correctly. I'd learned the wrong name a minute ago and Abby had told me there. But I'm going to pass you all on to Abby, who's going to tell us a bit about what's involved here. And then we'll go through everyone that's in not everyone that's involved, but everyone's on the call today. So yeah, Abby, could you tell us a bit about the Regenerative Farming Network?
Just before we get started with another episode of the R2Kast, I would like to thank our primary sponsors, A-Plan Rural. A-Plan Rural are heavily involved on the social media scene in the ag space with 120,000 followers on Instagram. They use this following to host social media takeovers with farmers throughout the country to showcase their stories. They also post to their rural community blog with further stories about these people in the industry. On top of this, they like to support initiatives that are championing the British agricultural industry, such as myself. So thank you to A-Plan Rural for that.
Sure thing. Hi Wallace. It's great to meet you finally in person. Well, sort of in person.
Big in person, you know.
Yeah, I can see you, so I believe you're now a real person. So yeah, my name's Abby. I'm a market gardener in Galloway. So I'm based in the Glen Kens near Balmaclellan, and I market garden on. It's only about 1/4 of an acre to 1/2 an acre, so it's not a huge space. And I sell my vegetables to households in Balmaclellan, in New Galloway, in Dalry, and a little bit to kind of cafes and restaurants around the area as well. I'm really, really passionate about kind of soil health and ecosystems and ecology and stuff like that. So when I was approached in 2021 by Nourish, which is a sort of Scottish campaigning organisation for better food and farming systems, to host a series of dialogues with farmers, with farmers and also with local authority policy officers about agriculture and climate change. So in the run up to COP26, it seemed like a really good opportunity to bring farmers of all types together. So start talking about, I guess, shifting the narrative from, conventional farming to more agroecological and regenerative farming systems. So that was 2021. And then after COP26 in early 2022, we kind of opened the group up a bit more. So we went from 50, there was 50 people signed up to that group and joining webinars in 2021. We opened it up in early 2022, and the group's now expanded to, we've just shipped over 160. Just literally this week, I've added another 3 people. And basically what people get when they join the Regenerative Farming Network is a bulletin from me every Tuesday, which is a roundup of lots of webinars and events and podcasts and videos and reading and research, which are all kind of themed around different aspects of regenerative and agroecological farming systems. We try and have a farm walk every month. So we're off to Bailcurich on the 23rd of February this month, where we can see stuff happening in practice and actually meet each other in person. And then this group, all these lovely humans here, are part of the Soil Health Group. And the Soil Health Group are 17 farmers altogether who have kind of committed to joining each other a bit more often. So we have a weekly Zoom call, and we use Soil Mentor as a shared kind of collaborative platform We have a very busy WhatsApp group and share lots of knowledge on a daily basis all the time. Sometimes just pictures of sheep, quite often pictures of sheep. Why not? But we try and dig a lot of holes and count a lot of earthworms and look at riser sheaths and infiltration rates and that kind of thing, and do everything we can to help each other to improve our farming systems. And I'll let everybody else introduce themselves. We're a very diverse bunch and come from a range of different backgrounds.
So there's a lot going on.
Basically, yeah. It's a big knowledge sharing, peer-to-peer, land worker, farmer to farmer, knowledge sharing group. So we're all basically on the same page. We want to do better.
Yeah, well, that's it. And I think, you mentioned the sort of bulletin. It must take you ages to write those emails. They're huge. I don't think I've ever written an email that big. And everything in it is good. Everything in it's interesting. It was quite a pleasure to actually be involved in it once, but it's fantastic, and quite an honour again tonight to hijack your weekly meeting. But what I'm going to do is, the way I'm seeing this on my screen is probably different to anyone else, but it's the way I'm going to go with it anyway. I tell you what, we'll go through and we'll hear everyone's story now. Hugh, you seem to be first for me. Could you tell us about yourself and your sort of backstory?
Yeah, hi Wallace. I like Abby's word, committed. She certainly is, and so are the group. So I'm Hugh Connick. I'm managing director. I run a company called Connick's Group. We're based in southwest Scotland, Newton Stewart, and we work all over the UK, but primarily Scotland. And we work in land, environment, and utilities. So the core at the heart of our company, I guess, is ecology and environmental management. And we run a small team of 7 of us, and we work on anything from holistic land management in agriculture and farming through to forestry, feasibility, sustainability. We work with lots of different companies, from small, private landowners. We've got a couple of acres up to landowners who've got thousands of acres, and some of the largest utility companies who operate, in the UK. I'm a Welshman, and I've been living in Scotland for 20 odd years. And Saturday is going to be some match of the rugby, but we'll keep that out of it. The group is an amazing group of people. I have grown immensely just by being amongst them and in their company. And the diversity and the sharing is great, and it's a very inclusive, non-judgmental environment. Where you can turn up if you want to, and you can just chat in a free environment and share ideas. So
I think through COVID that was sort of things we missed, and then I know you guys started through COVID and things like Zoom and whatnot gave platform for that, and it was good. But now that we're sort of coming out of the Zoom, whatever you want to call it, I don't know, period. Even though it's still here, it's useful, and it's not like, oh my god, Zoom. You're using it normally for something pretty positive, and being able to sort of get on the ground and see each other again is good. I wish I could sort of enjoy the rugby chat, but if I didn't have about 4 million people post Duhan on Facebook, I wouldn't have, and have to Google it then, I wouldn't have known what Duhan meant. So I thought it was another Chinese city. I had no idea. So rugby is not my thing. Football I can go all day, but no, I don't know about rugby.
Let's not go there. No.
Yeah. I was asking my mates, I was like, I don't actually understand the rules. What are these words? What's a ruck and all this? And they just said, just shut up, Wallace, and stick to football. But I'll come back to you in a minute, Hugh. I have a question sort of before the company. But John, could you tell us a bit about yourself? You're muted.
I'll get the swear box ready. Hi Wallace. I'm John Veach, a small tenant farmer for Neargate House of Fleet. I'm 4th generation, and I'll be the last.
Okay.
I've no family, and that when I'm ready to stop, that'll be it. I hope that eventually I'll be able to leave it better than I got it. The farm, I mean, hence the move to a more nature friendly. After watching a podcast, a webinar thing last Monday night, I think I've maybe finally found where I sit. and that high nature value farming, high value nature farming, whatever, seems to just be it. If you took the top off my head and unscrambled the mess that's in there, you might just have come up with something that resembled what they were saying. So it was quite worthwhile. Like this group, everybody's so diverse, as Hugh says, non-judgmental. You can talk as much nonsense as you like, and somebody's maybe able to point you in a better direction. I'm quite new to the regenerative style, and that came about as much as to do with the price of fertiliser and no putting it on and still needing to be productive, as much as my interest in the wider biodiverse nature of the farm. I've got a few suckler coos now. There's only 20, I think there's 22, 23, and I had 150 ewes, which I had got to 50. Much as I'm meaning to change a breed, I'm not that fond of sheep, really. I'm no. I grew up with an Ayrshire dairy. We had pedigree Ayrshire's when I was wee, and I think that rubs off. I think it does. But anyway, BSE galvanised the need not to have all your eggs in one basket. So there will probably have to be graziers. It's a grazing farm, it's not a cropping farm, and quite a wet area. So forage is easy enough to, silage is easy enough to grow, hay maybe, isn't it? So there'll have to be graziers or mixed species. There might be poultry, might have to be some deer, who knows? Maybe even some goats. I don't know. Quite a lot of things in the mix.
My old man's selling some goats if you're needing some. So,
and I think we've another lady in the group who breeds goats. So
I love goats. They're so fun. They're just, you could watch them all day. And this isn't going well. I've got one rugby fan when I'm a football fan. I've got one cow fan and I'm a sheep fan. I don't know what's coming next. I see a harp in the background of the next person. So I'm not anti-harp because I don't really know anything about any musical instruments. So at least it's going well so far. That's fantastic, John. I've got a few questions for yourself as well, but we'll move on in a minute. Evie, could you tell us a bit about yourself, please?
Sure. The reason for the harp is just to take your eyes off the bed.
I never even saw the bed till you
which
said
is
it.
Covered in electric fencing gear. They sent the wrong side of something today. So anyway, it's a mess. This is You're all in really nice places. In fact, Hugh looks like he's in a jungle, the kind of backlit jungle. Why am I living in a mess?
But you could say he's a bit of a fraud. You don't know what's behind him actually. He's just got one of those backgrounds on. I've got a pretty boring background of the top of a headboard and a white wall, so I could probably work on it too.
I'm so envious of all you minimalists, because I obviously. So anyway, I'm completely different. I live in a community which started as a commune back in the early 70s, 50 years ago. It's not a commune now. I suppose theoretically, legally, we're a housing co-op. But I've been here nearly 40 years. We grow all our own veg in a Victorian walled garden. We've got milk cows. We've got some chickens. We have pigs in the summer. We get our own firewood. We've got our own hydroelectric scheme off the burn. But then, we've been trying. I've been becoming aware of regenerative farming. I went at a very old age to the uni at Dumfries to do that environmental science and sustainability thing. I could be quite derogatory about it, but anyway, I went at a bad time, I think. And then there was COVID, and then I got a really bad diagnosis. I'm not ever so well, but about that time we also bought a bit of land nearby, like 45 acres, to stop the local super dairy or the local Sitka spruce magnates or whoever it was to take it over. We also managed to stop Abbey, which was not intentional in that way. Sorry. Anyway, so it's weird. So this is my dream really, is to years ago I got a free ticket to the ethical conference, was it called? At Rainton Farm, they got the ethical dairy, and they did a conference because I was a student at that point. They gave me a free place, and I remember this old couple from Texas who were amazing. And I was thinking, they flew them in. This is terrible. But they were amazing and they blew my mind. They were doing kind of mob grazing. So, and I think some of what I learned at the uni as well made me think I'm really fascinated by soil, and I've been reading lots and stuff. So finally, and we've got a kindly, friendly farmer who's lent us some. We've had yearlings last year, cows I'm talking. We also had loads of sheep, and I must admit I'm not a fan, mainly because I'm too old to kind of throw myself about and get beaten up by them. And they seem to need endless feet things and shearing things and what is it called?
I'm guessing treatment for strike and such like that. Yeah.
Fly strike, that's the one. So they seemed much more disposable and sad and frightened, whereas the cows just seemed great and hunky and laid back. And actually once the sheep went, it was just easier keeping cows in. So we've been mob grazing. It was our first year. We sort of rented it out the summer before. And so this is a bit of land that's been a quarry until 30 years ago. So it's really been messed up by humans. And then it's been set stocked with mostly sheep, some cattle for 30 years. So it's, I was amazed there was 40 species of, forbs and grasses and whatever the other one, legumes, this summer. And that was the first kind of season it has been rotationally grazed, whatever. So I'm very excited about what's going to come up, although it's been quite hard winter on it. And we're going to plant some trees. So there's a lot happening, and I just hope my energy keeps up with it, and we'll get some more cattle in. And I don't know how I'd ever get into money making, because boy, that's hard. I'm doing my holistic management training right now, and that's really good.
It sounds like you say you worry your energy will keep up. It sounds like your passion will certainly overrun the energy. It doesn't sound like that'll be an issue.
Yeah, that is what I'm hoping.
I have so many questions about the commune idea. That's so interesting, but we'll come back in a minute. Moving on to Colin. What was that, Emmy?
You can come for a visit anytime you like.
Excellent. You're going to regret that, because I take people up on these things. They're like, oh yeah, you should come. And I'm like, okay, I'll be there next week. So I will take you up on that. Colin, funnily enough, we actually have our namesakes. My first name is actually Colin. Good
name.
Yeah, it is a good name. It is a good name indeed. But my dad and my papa were both Colin and lived in the same house when I was born. So mum gets sick of shouting and getting an old decrepit man, a husband, and a little kid. So
my father-in-law works with us in the farm, and he's Colin as well. So
Colin just seems to be a name that you either have no relationship to or everyone is Colin.
Yeah.
So Colin, tell us about yourself.
I'm Colin Russell. Myself and my wife run Ramsden Farm. We're probably as far north as this group goes in North Ayrshire. We're just outside Kilmarnock.
Right.
And we've got I grew up on a farm myself. My wife actually moved to our farm when I was 12, and we kind of became childhood sweethearts there.
Oh.
And grew up together on the farm, and then I actually went and did engineering. So I studied mechanical engineering, but we bought a small holding here, 16 acres, in 2014 when I was still working as an engineer, because we were rural people. We wanted to stay rural. We wanted a bit of land. We were lucky enough to get some. And then I got fed up with engineering. I got fed up with traveling around the world, and it just seems so excessive, and everything else, constantly flying and just racking up your carbon footprint and stuff. And then eventually got to the point where I said, no, I'm not doing this anymore, and decided to break away to the farming side, because we did it as hobby, the kind of small scale for yourself sort of thing. And then we decided to go at it. So in 2019 we went full time with that, or I went full time with that. My wife's a primary teacher. She still teaches part time. Our main thing is poultry. So we're running like the pastured poultry model that you see the likes of Perkins and Salatin and that running, and trying to kind of prove that out here. And we do both layers and broilers, and it's highly mobile system. It's quite challenging, and the regulations really don't suit very well for that.
Right.
So we're always speaking with the regulators about rules and regulations because they're made for big static houses. So we've been doing that now for what, 1, 2, 3, so 4 years now. And it's going well now. There's just so much to learn all the time. I'm constantly learning, but we feel like we're starting to get somewhere. We've been developing soy-free feed as well for the last few years. So we've got a kind of own feed now that we get made for us, and we use all Scottish ingredients as well, which we're quite proud of. You know,
That's awesome. Yeah, that's really cool.
It's a big topic just now, you know, and it's getting bigger and bigger with obviously the destruction that soy's been causing because of the way humans are growing it, etc. Poultry is the main thing. We've been implementing silvopasture over the last few years as well in the fields. So we're creating tree laneways on a key line plan and running a silvopasture orchard, so that in 4 or 5 years' time that'll give us start bearing fruits. You know, there'll be maybe 3 to 350 orchard trees, and try and give us, that's, everyone talks about stacking enterprises, that kind of thing. Aye. Where we can run the chickens and the sheep and that in between the trees and still get something from the trees. So just kind of implementing that. We're kind of halfway through planting, and we just plant ourselves, so it's kind of a bit slow going, but we get there. And then more recently I've been studying more soil, and that's where this group kind of comes in. Started doing the training with the Soil Food Web School in America at Wayne Ingram's school.
She is a legend.
Oh, she is. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. She's still the most watched video at Oxford Real Farming Conference, the one she did. So yeah, been doing that, and then I did a lab tech as well, which I just finished my qualifications in that in December. So, can now kind of look at soil through the microscope and assess it and give an accurate assessment to our standards for people, So we're just looking to start kind of proving some of our work out on the farm. We're making compost, and we're going to start doing teas this year, and really trying to, typically Ayrshire, it's very clay heavy, and a lot of compaction issues, the soils are all collapsed. So we're just trying to kind of see if we can accelerate the regeneration of that a bit, with microbes.
Excellent.
So that's kind of our journey.
Well, I am an Ayrshire man, in fairness.
Brilliant.
Not a Dumfries boy. I'm from Arran. So,
all right, okay.
I don't know if some people in Ayrshire just strictly don't count that. They just call me a pot flat, but I don't really think that's what I am. But no.
We know Woodside in Arran, the farm, they do passion poultry as well, so we're good friends with them.
I was going to ask if you know Gordon and Maria Liggett.
No.
All right. Have you seen the Wee Brown Hens? They've stopped trading as that now, but.
I've heard of that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, Gordon Gordon worked at All2Spurn and was like, I kind of want to do something different. But he got proper into it, and he went out to Germany to train, looking into production of poultry. And I'm not going to say any more and embarrass myself.
Germany's mad. Germany's got so much good equipment. If you've got the money, it's amazing.
That's the place. Yeah, no, I've had Joel Salton on the podcast. It was really interesting.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and Joe, you mentioned Elaine. I always got her surname wrong. Ingram.
Yeah.
I just came across the Soil Food Web thing, and quite a lot of people that know me know you were saying you could look under a microscope and be able to tell. I could barely be able to tell if soil was in my hand. Like, I'm dreadful at soil. And I was watching this and trying to gain a few things, and I can't remember the exact thing she said to compare this to, but the thing she said that I'll tell you about it, I thought was amazing. She was basically saying, this fact is correct. I don't care what you think. I'm right. And then she just goes, if it quacks, it's a duck.
Yeah. It's an
just
Americanism, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. I mean, what was it Joel called the gobbledygolls? That's what he called the sort of moving things.
The turkeys.
Well, like the boxes they're in that you were talking about, I forgot.
Yeah, the gobbledygolls are the like the perching system that you put them out in the field.
And that's the ones. Yeah, I thought gobbledygook was brilliant. But Irene, could you give us a wee bit about yourself? You're muted at the minute.
Spotted it. Like John, I actually grew up in a dairy farm, but we were British Friesians, not Ayrshire's, down in Lancashire. We moved to Scotland when I was in my late teens. My dad was told to stop farming. He just chose to go somewhere a bit cleaner aired and carried on. So, up here we were beef and sheep, but my brother's got that farm now. So where we are, I actually did 12 years with the Department of Agriculture.
Right.
Well, scrappy as it is now, as I go, and started up on the islands, and then shifted down to Dumfries after a wee while, which was kind of handy because it's not far for Dad. And after a wee while, I managed to, with the selling a house up there, I managed to buy a small farm down here.
Excellent.
And that's where I still am, 20 odd years later. It's
and you've got
160-acre hill farm. I'm up near Carsfairn.
Right.
Right up in the hills. I think the only reason I managed to get it is because it's full of electric lines, so the folk with trees didn't want it.
Of course, yeah, of course.
It's a bit useless for trees. So it's long and narrow. We keep about 25 Galloway, mostly Galloway, some beef shorthorn crosses, about 110 Cheviot cross yows, and somebody mentioned goats. Yeah, we have a few goats.
56 goats.
We do a bit of all sorts.
Oh, right, okay, a few goats, not like 5.
A few goats, aye.
Right, okay, yeah. Thank you for that.
We do a bit of all sorts. It's a small place and try to make a living off it. It's not easy. I first met Abby through the farmers markets and that, because I use the garden for growing veg, which I sell and make preserves with. And my husband does a wee bit of alternative work with the animals, using them for TV and film work.
Oh, really? Very cool.
Yeah. Aye. As far as getting into the sort of regenerative side of things, I'm a wee bit like John, a bit of a newcomer to it. It's something that's always been there in the background, but unlike most farmers, we don't really use any fertiliser anyway. Well, we don't use any fertiliser up here. It's a waste of time.
I know the area you're talking about. It'd be pretty difficult as well, if I'm thinking of the right place. I know where Carsfairn is, but I'm just sort of basing it on what's around there. It'd be pretty tricky to get to a lot of the places fertiliser as well, never mind.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of this place you can't get to be a tractor. It's in high summer. Surrounded by forestry, absolutely surrounded by forestry, which is one of our biggest issues when it comes to like some mob grazing, because the forestry dike is atrocious, and you try to restrict them on here, and they just wait and the trees come back in and the next bit down. So that makes life a bit trickier. So it's learning. It's learning how to deal with that and learning from other folk how. I love watching John's videos and his pictures, because he's starting up just the same, and I'm just trying to follow him and see what he's learning, and then there's Tim as well. Is Tim on tonight? I can't at the moment.
Yeah.
We went. That was the first farm walk I went on, was down to see Tim and his sheep,
right,
and how he was dealing with it, because he's not that different a size of a farm. It's just a bit lower down, and it was how he was dealing with it and the electric fences he's using, and that's what this group's been so good. It's just learning from what other folk are doing. That's about it, really.
And you can see you sort of support each other as well. Like you can see that, even when each other are talking, you're like, I can watch you sort of supporting each other sort of in the background. It's quite nice. I probably not what you expect me to say, but Carsfairn has the best cafe I've ever been in. Trust me to be able to raise
I'll tell Lindsay.
Do because I used to go with my ex's family all the time, but funnily enough I don't do that anymore. But it is absolutely brilliant. Loved it. I mean, they do this chili and haggis burger. I mean, it must be about 3,500 calories, but it's amazing. So yeah, do please pass that on.
She runs a wee enterprise called Scone Mad as well, and she does of like crazy sort of flavoured scones, like
Crazy scones.
crazy, like what, Marmite and Iron Brew or something. I don't know. I'm making that up a bit, but
What
yeah,
a great name.
Scone mad. Yeah.
That's excellent. Yeah, no, they're a good pair if you enjoyed it in there. And Irene had mentioned Tim there. Tim, by no means least, but you are currently last, but no way least. Give us a wee bit about yourself there, Tim.
I'm Tim Barnes, and been involved in farming all my working life, as initially as a hill shepherd in Argyll, and then latterly for the last 15 years up until 2.5 years ago as also farming my own right as with a contract farming agreement, and various things happened which changed my life, and I ended up moving down here 2.5 years ago. But one thing I suppose that's very minor part of why I moved away from Argyll is that I came across the concept of regenerative grazing, and it made so much sense that I couldn't do anything but take it on. So I started on my Weecroft the year before we moved down here with our small flock of plain ewes, with using electric fences, with strip grazing, and overseeding with legumes and herbs, which worked quite well down there. So we moved here, I'd say 2.5 years ago, increased the flock, so doubled in size, and have since then been doing regenerative grazing here, and getting, I suppose, as my understanding of soil and regenerative practices increases, and this group has fed into that very, very much, then that thing of it making so much sense, it just goes on making sense. So it's sort of, in a way, snowballs for me. So I see a broader thing, a broader impact on what we could do, and I see the depth of the impact that we hopefully are developing and going to have on our wee farm.
It's quite interesting, probably John, Colin, Irene, and yourself, Tim, have been involved at some point in conventional farming, whether that's yourself or family, and sort of seen that movement to regenerative for whatever reason. Three of you mentioned was fertilizer. I've had various arable farmers and large scale farmers on and whatnot in the podcast, and it's to the point that it's financially damning to some businesses. But then you sort of look forward and you're like, well, let's forget finance for a minute and try and consider the sort of environmental benefit of the Haber-Bosch process not happening, or not happening. I assume that's a stage we never get to, but reducing at least. And then, well, as you're saying that, well, as you're sort of showing now, maybe it is a stage we get to.
Anything is possible.
Absolutely.
we really need to decarbonize our entire economy, and food and farming systems are no different to that. And I think it's been proven over and over again through regenerative and agroecological holistic management, whatever you want to call it, that you can build soil health and soil fertility through kind of natural processes if you just manage the situation right. As a market gardener, I use no-dig systems, so Charles Dowding is a bit of a god, I guess, in that world. Although I have met him in person in January at the Oxford Farming Conference, and he's such a nice guy. He's just like shares all the knowledge. He's not kind of doesn't keep it to himself. He's happy to share. So, and I think that's what groups like this are about. It's like that knowledge sharing is so crucial, so we can understand how to build soil health and soil fertility and protect, nurture, love our ecosystems, and move away from this kind of extractivist and input heavy kind of system that we currently operate.
Yeah, and I think we're in sort of an interesting stage where we're just about to well, we still have subsidy until 2028, we think, from an EU perspective. You know, on a large scale agricultural basis, what's next? And the only way I see assistance in that form coming is promotion of biodiversity, reduction of carbon, increasing carbon sequestration, all these things. Now, yes, there's got to be some look at protein output. It's a massive, very important part. We've got to feed the planet. But yeah, I think that's a push we're going to see. I hope it's a push we're going to see. I don't know where we're actually going next. The way I sort of normally run these group podcasts is sort of, let's jump back to Hugh, let's jump back to John and sort of run through everyone. But I'm conscious if we do that, we'll be here till Saturday, because there's quite a few of us. So what I'm probably going to do is maybe just sort of throw questions out, and just, you guys are brave enough, you know each other, so just whoever feels like they want to answer, just go for it. And you mentioned one there, Abby, that's probably a good one to jump on. What do you think the future of carbon is? Like, do we see carbon credits? I personally have spoke quite a few times, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, that the idea of carbon credits and making carbon a commodity is a horrible and scary prospect. But some people totally disagree with me. I know that. I've met a lot of people that disagree with that. But yeah, talk to carbon. Talk about carbon. Tell me what you think, where we're going there, where we are now, the sort of moves we've already made. We're talking about carbon now, whereas when I was at uni, we had a course in fourth year called carbon management, sure, but that was probably it, you know. So it's a good thing that we're moving in that direction.
I would just like to quickly interrupt the show for a minute to give you some extra information on our primary sponsors, A-Plan Rural. A-Plan offer bespoke cover for farms and estates the UK over, and will give you tailored insurance for anything on the farm, from your old workhorse tractor that's been around 20 years or a fancy new and exciting diversification.
You want me to kick off because I mentioned we had a carbon audit?
Excellent.
Right, well, I think the carbon audit's a load of shite. Simple. It's no use trying to tell me where I am if you don't count grassland carbon sequestration. I accept that's very difficult to measure accurately, but we have to start somewhere. My finite resources need to be pointed in the direction where I can gain most benefit to me and to the wider environment. So I didn't want to be heading essentially to Perth or Inverness via Perth when I should be heading to London. By the time I get to Perth, you realise I've gone the wrong way and I should be going the opposite direction. You turn me back. That is how stupid I think some of it is. And until, as has been mentioned elsewhere, until we look at the whole picture, we need to see the thing holistically. We need to look at everything, and that includes the grassland sequestration. As far as I'm concerned, it's an output calculation, no more. Not an audit. An audit's a balance of the positives and the negatives. And I really get quite annoyed at some of the suggestions that this agriculture, whatever version we're on now, is going to be the way to go. There's none of it the way to go until they start taking account of everything, the balances, the ins and the outs.
I couldn't agree more. And you know, I work for a company that owns AgriCalc, and I've called it out on a few occasions that the issues I have with it is, you know, I'm not anti-dairy and I'm not anti-dairy in any way, but I don't know how you can tell me you've got an intensive 365-day housed dairy herd with probably about 100% synthetic water transport, 100% animal feed transported. Everything is transported to that one place. Now, I've got a bit of an issue with 365-day housed, but I don't have an issue with 180 days. There's sustainable ways to do that, but that system, there is no way you can tell me that is worse for carbon than an extensive house sheep system. It can't be. There's 97% of that water is naturally transported in the sheep system. You're never ploughing. You're never opening up any ground anywhere. Everything is just getting taken off the hill. And like you say, John, I mean, AgriCalc's not the only one at all, not by any stretch, but I think until it's completely holistic, we can't monetize this, and it's what's about to happen. And if it is going to get monetized, it has to be done right, and I can't see that happening.
Me neither. So we'll see what everybody else thinks.
I think it's too complex.
I'm very much on the same page, John. Carry on, Colin.
What do you mean? Like what? Yeah, I clearly agree with John. Colin, you said there it's too complex. In what sense? In that you never think it will be possible to cover everything, or
not necessarily. I mean, I'm not good with the politics of things, so excuse me here, but there's two things I see. One is it's so complex because if I'm set stocking versus mob grazing versus the best form of holistic plan grazing, all of those are going to sequester carbon at different rates. Now, are we going to start getting really good at measuring carbon in the soils? You know, because a lot of people still debate that we can't even properly accurately measure carbon, but we accept what we have now. But it's like there's so many variations in one system, you know, and that AgriCalc, Heather Close had posted about her dad had written into Scottish Farmer about it recently, saying about it being wrong with as John's talking about the grassland stuff. And I went and read a bit about the article, and I think it was Dr. Rachel Ramsey, I think, and she was talking about how they consider that grassland is basically saturated at a certain point, carbon percentage, a certain percentage of carbon, you know, it gets saturated. So they don't consider grassland because they basically say that if you've had a long-term grass system that you've been grazing, they basically accept that it's at its saturation point of carbon. But two things to that is when we regeneratively graze, like especially really intensively, where you're talking like £1 million of foot per acre, you know, and moving 6 times a day, the regeneration at that rate is massive. And people are putting carbon numbers that are going up and up and up. And I don't think this saturation accounts for the fact that if you do it that way, and I don't know if it also accounts for depth, because you may saturate the top 6 inches, but your next 10 feet are still subsoil, and then they need to get back to, because topsoil grows downwards, it doesn't grow upwards. It does, but it grows downwards. You know, when we talk about building topsoil, we physically think of building soil, but we're building downwards.
Just getting closer to the sun.
Yeah, exactly. So you know, so we're allowing the plants to root deeper, etc. So how do you account for that? How do you account for depth? How do you account for management style? How do you measure that? So that's one point, and then the other point is just anytime we have a subsidy system, those that are able to influence the most will influence to suit their needs to make sure they get the most money.
100%.
And therefore you get a system that isn't just inherently corrupt, whether the people that want the most see themselves as corrupt, or they may not be corrupt within the system or whatever, but it basically works to a corrupt nature, you know, because
corrupts the system.
You know, if any of you shout the loudest, and then their main shareholders are big, massive dairy farms, and then they want that calc to work in their favour. So, you know, why would you want to promote a system that isn't going to give you as much money as you currently get? You're not. So everyone's going to fight it.
Do you know, it's you say quite a lot of interesting points there, Colin. One thing that I've always thought is, you know, if you're considering set stock, and I realise we've been talking about mob grazing the whole time, we haven't actually said what it is, so I'll throw that out to everyone in a minute. But if you're considering the two, if you're mob grazing, rotational grazing, paddock grazing, all similar, slightly different, but you know, for the most part, you're attacking that grass more often. In my head, you're attacking that grass quicker, more intensely over a short period of time. In my head, now I'm not a grass expert, not at all. We're speaking with a man at the minute who is behind some grass, but every time you batter that grass down quickly over the short period of time with these grazing systems, they're going to have to grow back, the retiller quicker back. That's going to be more carbon going into that product. So surely that form is sequestering more carbon into an animal that's then picking it up. And then if you're talking about sheep, every year you're taking 2 kilos off at 45% carbon and wool. You know, there's so much things being tied in here. I don't think they're all being considered. But just quickly, away from carbon for a minute, we have been talking about mob grazing. Could someone tell me what that is? Well, tell the viewers, I guess, what that is. Who's going to go for it?
We're all waiting for Tim.
I think Hugh would be good to talk about that, actually. But yeah, maybe Tim.
Mob grazing, or maybe more descriptively, adaptive multi-paddock grazing. So the adaptive bit is you're responding to your weather, your topography, the needs of your soil, the needs of your animals as well. But basically, you are restricting your animals onto ground to graze for not more than 3 days, because after 3 days, there will be regrowth, and that regrowth will be targeted by the stock. And at that point, you are taking back the energy from the roots of your plants. So you want to avoid that. You're wanting to encourage the roots and to grow and strengthen and be in your soil. So if you move after one, or in some cases people are moving several times a day, but basically 1, 2 or 3 days is what I do, and then move on to another strip of grazing, leaving what you've just grazed for at least people will be leaving it for at least 3 weeks. I tend to leave at least for a month to 6 weeks, and in some cases I'm aiming at 9, 10, 11 weeks before returning to that strip and grazing again. And in that time, that grass or that grazing will very quickly recover, because it's been trampled, it's had the most nutritious bits taken off, but there's a lot of leaf there still to photosynthesize. So the recovery and growth is quick. And as time goes on, as the grass roots become more embedded with the ecology in the soil, that regrowth and the activity in the soil will increase, and that's the basic aim. What goes on from that, we could talk, and we do talk about for forever and ever. But that's the basic idea. Does that make?
Yeah, a lot of sense. Yeah, absolutely. Looks like Hugh's got more to add, though. I see he's just unmuted this second.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. This is the interesting thing about this group, and sort of mob grazing, I guess, means different things to different people. But I kind of see mob grazing as a cheap coin word for holistic planned grazing. And quite often, if you speak to anybody who's done Alan Savory's holistic planned grazing course, you don't mention the word mob grazing. It's holistic planned grazing, because your consideration is always planning ahead. But I love Tim's system, and when I went to Tim's farm, incredibly inspiring person. And what I like about not just this group, but Tim's approach, is that it's driven from a passion and an inquisitiveness to not do harm to the environment. And I think that's the difference between a lot of regenerative farming, is you're seeking to understand your land and your ecosystems better before, as part of your decision making.
Yeah.
So you're really taking into heart your landscape, your context. In terms of mob grazing, I got holistic land management books, which are my Bibles I go by, and I've worked with National Trust doing holistic plan grazing in their ecosystems, and it's incredibly hard. But it's hence the name. It's planned grazing. You're always looking where your animals are grazing, the recovery times, the herd effect, cause and effect on the land. I just back up what Tim says, and been incredibly impressed by, I've not been to other people's farms, but his system and his passion for looking after the land.
Yeah, definitely. And sorry for laughing over you there, Hugh. I just noticed that Evie pointed up the exact same book.
Well, I got that one as well. That version.
I've got it as well.
Oh, everybody's got it. Jeepers.
I'm missing out.
Only I had a copy of that.
No.
So you think you've got some that no one else has, and the full got it. Yeah.
Spoiler. It's a spoiler.
I've already got a PDF of it.
I never bought it. Paperless, better for the environment. You and Evie, you know.
It's not as good for your eyes, so.
Yeah, no, I'm like knowing it. So I've got this book where I write like notes on podcasts like as we go, but it's the only paper I have, and sometimes like managers and whatnot at work will like give me a bit of paper to take notes in meetings, and people take the piss because like the only time I ever write anything, it's all on screens. But also my eyes are terrible when I look at screens, so I should maybe try and do both. One thing I really want to jump back to from right at the start, I've got a question for you all again, but I've got one person I really want to ask some questions to, and it's Evie. Evie, could you tell us about, I'll be honest, I don't actually really know what a commune is. What is this? What does it involve, and how, yeah, just tell us how it works.
Well, what I did say was that this is no longer a commune. When it was a commune,
yes.
It was income sharing, and now it's not income sharing. So we all pay rent. It's remarkably and embarrassingly low, and that covers our expenses. But we are expected to work here, and we've never yet found a way. I mean, it's very much from each according to their abilities, to each according to their needs. So there is no having to sign stuff out or eat less of something, or it's just it seems to work, you know, but of course you get resentments and stuff. So it's a bunch of people living together, but I think it is, we're lucky because it started 50 years ago, and with some sort of fairly rich for middle class, upper middle class, I would probably call them, folk from London coming up, owning houses. They only bought this place by mistake because this guy came up and put in an offer, not knowing that when you get to Scotland, putting in an offer is binding. So they actually had to buy this. We're in a strange little frost pocket, and you know, the big ugly great kind of mansion house, but it's got its uses, and you know, it's probably just an asylum where we've all been sent. And so I always feel a bit of a fraud, because at the moment I'm doing my financial planning with the holistic management bunch, and you know, like, we don't really do money so much. It's much more growing food and sharing it and giving it away, and I understand why most people have to make money, but also I think our whole system is so corrupt and wrong, and it's brought us to this place where we've pretty much destroyed the planet we're living on. And I think capitalism has a lot to answer for. And even when I see people I admire loads, like Gabe Brown, they're all like still driving their big tractors and into making lots of money and flying around the world. And some part of me, of course, would like to challenge all of that and go, you know, what we need to do is feed the people around us to eat in season, to eat food that we're producing ourselves, organically, but as well as regeneratively. There's so much, and God, I had so much to say about carbon credits and so much to say about mob grazing. So anyway, I don't know why it's worth talking about communities though, because it seems that nobody can afford to get a place, to buy land, and that's partly because of these buggers like insurance companies based in London who are buying up family farms in Dumfries and Galloway to put their stupid Sitka spruce plantations so they can get carbon credits, so that rich people can carry on flying as if the planet cares whether you paid your, I don't know, I don't even understand carbon credits, but we've got a government that runs something called Drax Power Station, or gives them loads of money every year so they can cut down old growth forests in Southeast America, USA, and then turn it all into pellets and ship it over in ships to this country and call it carbon neutral, and that's the account that way. This is just diabolical, and it's all neoliberals that are bringing us, and you know, I weep when I think of my grandchildren. So for me, this is a massive thing about, I mean, I used to be somebody that would glue myself to the road a lot, and now I'm just too sick. So now I just want to farm because it feels in a way more positive, and to regenerate, and to also increase biodiversity, because biodiversity loss, man, it's like even just as scary as climate change, and we are so fucked. I'm sorry. We have a great on this channel, but we're just messed up in a bad way. Can you cut that
It's
out?
so true. And on the credit thing, the thing that, you know, if a company buys ground that's derelict and not been used and puts trees on it and somehow makes it better in that sense, I can kind of see why that's incentivized. I'm not saying it's right, but I can see why it's incentivized. When it becomes someone buys up a patch of land that is already in that state, i.e. got trees on it, nothing changed. Nothing has changed. That is the thing that really sits wrong with me. And also from a farming perspective, sort of putting trees onto ground that should be, it's too good for trees, essentially, is another issue.
And
but,
also young folk can't even buy bits of land, or any age of folk, or folk that live in Dumfries and Galloway and want to have a bit of land and maybe grew up here, they can't even afford it because the price, I've heard of this woman that got paid millions for her family farm. I mean, nobody's got that kind of money here, and neither should they. I don't even know what I think about land ownership, really. It's an odd idea.
It's an interesting one, and I openly say that we are, my family own land, and by generational wealth or whatever it is, I will own that land, I assume, unless Dad and I majorly fall out. I can't see it. Sorry, Dad, if you're listening, and it's going to cat and dog home, but that sort of idea is there, and I have a student that challenges it hugely, and she's not wrong. Am I hypocritical to sort of talk about it and say that I'm probably still going to benefit from it? Yes, but it's a topic that I think we have to talk about. And is someone who owns land wrong for selling it for a ridiculous amount because someone that's came for trees? I don't know. I see Abby's got her actual hand up, so I look forward to hearing this.
Yeah, I just thought hands up was quite a sensible way to jump in rather than interrupting people. But yeah, I mean, I used to live in a housing cooperative as well, not the same one that Evie lives in, but one in South Lanarkshire. So I'm a massive fan of cooperatively owned and collectively owned sort of land-based or housing projects. I think it's a really viable way forward, especially for my generation. I'm 45, but that's still relatively young, and I cannot afford to buy somewhere by myself at all. Not in today's prices, not without getting a hefty mortgage, and I can't afford a hefty mortgage. So the kind of models that I'm looking at are sort of co-ownership, where I'm clubbing together with 4 or 5 people to look at kind of 30 acres or small farms or a small holding where we can buy together. Now, even at that, we've not managed to find that elusive place yet. So I'm still renting land from a friend that I live on and work on. But yeah, I think that's a model that we can take forward and actually utilize if we can only get in there in the property market. But as Effie said, all these kind of properties are being bought up first by kind of carbon credit companies and peat bog plantations and peat bog restoration projects and citrus fruit plantations. I think there is a way to regenerate the uplands that includes trees and livestock. And we need to do that. A lot of the uplands is overgrazed and badly managed. But we do need to kind of see a kind of more gentle way of managing that and kind of have trees like birch and rowans up there. But yeah, that's going to take some time to do, and the policy environment doesn't allow for that at all.
I think
sorry, I just come in on that one because this kind of hits on some of the core things, of I guess tonight's discussion, and Evie raised some really good stuff there, and so did Abby. And as a company, we sit very much in between, working on landscape scale, and we've worked on some of the biggest tree planting schemes in southwest Scotland, and they are always contentious. And they're contentious even as a consultant when you're doing them, because you're always navigating between the grey lines and the grey areas of delivering a target by the Scottish government to increase tree cover. When you understand that Britain is the 3rd largest importer of timber in the world, and that appetite's not going to change very, very soon. So how do you move away from that being a net importer to being self-sustaining? And you need more trees if you're going to start using trees for products and producing and keeping your ecosystems going. And as a farmer growing up in South Wales, and we do a lot of work in the hills and in South Scotland on species conservation, black grouse, etc. And at 4 o'clock in the morning, when you're standing on those hills and you're looking down a fence line of forestry on one side and sheep grazing on the other side, and the sheep grazing is lovely, but the grass is as short as a billiard table. There's hardly any grouse. The heather's gone. It's a depleted ecosystem. On the other side, you've got the contentious Sitka spruce, but you've got a very good understory in some places of nice heather, and you've got black grouse. So you got two parallels you can see in the landscape, straight away. So I think definitely there's a wider conversation to be had about land use change in Scotland and the drivers behind it, I think. And I can see it from many different angles, the critical side, but also the side where there is a huge challenge for the Scottish government to navigate to be in a relatively sustainable country, and also do as little harm as possible, but also be able to, I guess, bridging those gaps between, do you input masses of timber or do you grow your own? You're going to have to grow it somewhere. And I think farmers have got an amazing opportunity here to step up and grow more woodland on their farm in small, sustainable, like Colin's doing there, integrating his enterprise with trees. People are now doing it with sheep enterprises and cattle. And those things are happening. I sometimes get down about these things and get critical, but that's what I like about this group. There's people out there who are doing these things.
Yeah, absolutely. And things like this group are how these things begin to happen or continue to happen.
For sure. Yeah. It's empowerment and giving people the confidence to go for it and learn and share, I think. And
I can't tell if it's an ornament or John's hand up. It's John's hand up. John, fire on. You were so still for about a minute like this.
Right. I think it's interesting what Hugh's saying there. Maybe when a farm does disappear, and I'm coming at this for a few angles. I'm coming for it for a very forested Galloway already. To thinking where I might end up in 10 years' time. I might have to sell out of my tenancy, maybe return to the estate, who then sell it out to somebody who's going to plant a stack of trees on it. This is not the most productive land. It's the land in the middle. It's no peat bog, so it's not excluded. It's no high value arable land, which is too good to plant. It's the stuff in the middle. And this is the engine room with the grassland carbon sequestration. Going back to that, it's everything. And just on that, before I forget, if that's not true, if that's not right, why do we continue to teach children when they start science basic photosynthesis? What's the first page in the science book? So things that's green, as long as the sun comes up and there's a bit of moisture, the chlorophyll's helping us use carbon dioxide. That's a fundamental. If that's not right, it's high time that was addressed at school level, right? But back to the trees. If, let's say, the farm disappears and it's going to timber, would it not be sensible to make some of the better land into a sort of small holding to create this biodiverse sort of pocket? It's also a fire break. Instead of this blanket afforestation, it would either be one home, two homes for somebody who maybe has to do part-time. It might be that my replacement maybe manages their farm effectively. If it's 100 acre that's left, if it's 80 acres that's left, I don't know. But maybe they do that at evenings, half days, weekends. Maybe they're going to have to go in and get a job. Maybe we're going to have to accept that red meat consumption, protein might have to change. We maybe have a temperature controlled building where we grow insects. I don't know what the future is, but I think there's so many opportunities. I think they could reduce the size of planting that qualified for grant. We could maybe have biosecurity boundaries, so maybe for high animal health. So maybe there could be a forest strip, a woodland strip that's maybe fruit trees, it's maybe hazels and rowans and stuff, berries, things we can use that create that boundary that go towards the tree planting target, that don't really affect the productivity of the farm, but that add to the biodiversity and wildlife corridors. Again, I'm back to this holistic thing where we're going to have to see the bigger picture, look at everything, take everything into account. And I think if we can do that going forward, and that comes back to you as well, as to what the students are getting taught.
Definitely.
That's knowledge sharing. There's going to be a gap. We're going to get to the point where all us oldies are going to be gone, and there's nobody going to know what went on, know how to look after stuff. It was interesting to hear the lady, the crofter lady, saying last week they hadn't grown hay for 40 years up in that bit, and it was Ascent or Sutherland or whatever it was, and they didn't know how to grow hay when they started on with a few sheep and a few cattle again. And I'm thinking, I don't mean it. Do I know how to grow hay? And I barely know because it rains too much. And I've been,
well, you might know, but you never get the opportunity to try it.
Well, there you go. So there's an awful lot of knowledge gaps and things that need transferred, that need passed on to the next generation, and the students need to know. And the fundamentals has to be more about the soil.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd agree completely.
I think also, sorry, one thing I was going to add as well, that's a good point, John, was there's a few terminologies that fly around as well that I think people, I was been prompted by this thing tonight to look up what a farmer means. And the Oxford Dictionary says a person who owns or manages a farm. And
Is that what it's?
Yeah, and a farm, nothing. And then it says farm, a place for breeding a particular type of animal or producing a specific crop. So then going to a custodian, we quite often hear custodians of the countryside, a person who has the responsibility of taking care or protecting something. So those are words that are coined a lot in policy and agricultural bills and things like that. So maybe there's a separate discussion to be had somewhere about terminology. What do these terms and words mean, and how do they reflect our current or present passage in time?
Yeah. That's interesting. My podcast is called the R2Kast, People in Food and Farming, and people said, I've had a few folk ask, why have you put food in there? And I'm like, because that's why we're doing it. So it should really just be people and food, but farming gets views, but Irene, I see your hands up there. Sorry, it has been for a while, I apologise.
I know, it's all right, it's all interesting. There's a couple of things. One is like John's point about loss of skills. And one of the things I would really like to know, that I know my parents' generation knew, is how to lay hedges. But it's really not a skill that's much seen any longer. And even finding somebody that you know that could show you is tricky. My dad has the knowledge, but he no longer has the physical capability. There's a lot of skills like that has been lost over the last 20 years, and we need to find them again before they go forever.
You're absolutely right. There's actually a boy back home in Arran. His brother's my best friend, really. He's taught himself that, and he's bloody good at it. Mm-hmm. I've got a pal who is actually a TikToker, who has taught herself that too, and they are putting up hedges right round the whole farm at the minute. And I know that part of our course, Rural Skills at the college, does that as well. So it's actually something I want to get into agriculture course as part of farm maintenance. I think it'd be a good one to add in.
Well, hedges are a great way of putting biodiversity back into grassland farms.
Yeah, 100%. One of the best, really. Yeah.
Fabulous way of doing it. But the other is, Abby will know, I do have a bugbear with commercial forestry. probably because we're surrounded by so much of it. And just as Evie said, trees are not a bad thing, but these Sitka plantations and how they're managed is not a good thing, especially not that they're getting credited with so much ability to store carbon and when farming's being ignored. But so we're surrounded by these things. The forest companies have got no interest in managing their fences, their edges, so we lose sheep out. And then you get the forest ranger coming saying, I'm going to shoot your sheep if you don't bring them back. That's the sort of attitude we have to deal with up here. This parish in Carsfairn is over 55% afforested, which has had a huge effect on the community, the lack of young people, the lack of jobs, where you used to have farms and farms had families on them who supported the school. The school's mothballed, likely to close, and I can't see any way of changing that because the foresters don't live here, so you lose the community. And the management of these woodlands with their extensive road networks, which are all ditched, I know they mound rather than plough now, but the mounds are all in the line and they quite often end up washing out. So you end up with a plough, or if it's the harvest has been in, they leave tracks and that leaves water runoff. Carsfairn village flooded 3 times, 3 200-year floods inside 2 years, a few years ago.
Really?
Yeah. The whole village, there was only about half a dozen houses in the village were not affected. And then there was outside houses, like our farm was badly affected. Another one further up the Bow Burn was badly affected. They couldn't get out, the bridge washed away. We lost a lot of stock down in the burn because it just rose that fast and we couldn't get away.
That's sad.
There was an independent report done by Kaya Consultants, and it was the way the forestry had been managed that was getting the primary blame for the rapidness of the flooding in an area that hadn't flooded for decades. So I do have an issue with forestry, but I don't have an issue with trees, if you see what I mean. And I would love to put more trees on here, but with the electric lines, it's a bit of a problem. But that's where I like hedges because they are lower.
Yeah, definitely.
I do have a big issue with trees and commercial forestry, and the fact that, yes, they do have to put some broadleaf species in now, but basically it is a monoculture. And when it goes on for thousands of acres like it does here, we come out the back of us up past our march, and the next stop for any farmland is basically the top of the Merrick. It's all trees.
Yeah. No,
right for here to Glentrule.
No, it does become a pretty large scale monoculture in that sense. Yeah, and I liked your sort of, I don't have a problem with trees, I have a problem with woodland. I quite like, or forestry, I should say. I'm very excited, Tim. I just saw a cat, hands down the best animal. Colin, I think you had your hand up there a minute ago. Oh my God, sorry, look at the little cat. Oh, it's so like my wee Jamesy back home. Oh. Sorry, Colin.
No. I just following on from what Adam was saying about the forestries, I'd be interested to know how much the carbon credit schemes take into account the machinery used, the diesel used, the loss in carbon from the turnover of the land, of the machinery on it, because it's incredibly destructive. Not only that, but I know somebody that works in forestry, and the machinery has to get to the forest in the first place, and a lot of times you have to destroy a lot of land just to get there, and if not, you have to build a road. And then when you make a forest, it's contractually obliged by the forester to make a road in and out and maintain it. And I mean, the amount of asphalt they put down is crazy because they're running lorries 24/7 over these roads and they get destroyed. And it's in their contract that they have to maintain it because, they're going up roads that are B roads and back roads where people live, and they're turning them up and destroying them. So you know, they're always told, you know, you need to build a better road to maintain it so that the trucks don't wear it all down and people's cars get ruined. And I wonder if they take all that into account, that massive infrastructure works just to get into one forest for a clearing, because they can clear massive amounts in a very short period, you know. And it just, every time you put something at scale, every time you scale up, the more you scale up, it generally just becomes more unsustainable. You know, if you have a farm that's if you have a community scale forestry system where everyone in the farms are growing multiple diverse species, you know, and biodiversity, we're missing biodiversity in forests. You know, we talk about native species. I mean, even native species, they're not technically talking about that many trees. We can grow a lot more than just the natives. And what is native? You know, we don't know what lived here, you know, hundreds of millions of years ago. But yeah, it just strikes me, if you bring it down to a community scale and you start growing trees on a community scale for a community where you can build firewood, you can do timberwood, you know, it generally becomes, it always seems to be far more sustainable, you know. So yeah, there's a guy in Australia, Rowan Reid, and he is an agroforester, a very good one, and he's now at the point where he cuts down one of his trees every week, and he can do it for infinity because he's now set up a system where he's constantly planting and cutting down, but he's doing it on a small scale. It's not destructive. And I don't know if we need to try and find more ways to get to more of that kind of stuff.
It's, yeah, that's quite interesting. I mean, like, I don't know, when I started uni, you were sort of the typical 16 or 17-year-old farming son, that farming was all that mattered and nothing else mattered. And I think, you know, that's a thing that's changing, and it's actually quite refreshing to see new youngsters coming through the ranks, and I can teach folk as young as 15. It's mad. This year they could be 2008 born. That sickens me. But they're coming in and they're talking about the environment and they're talking about this sort of thing, and that's such a pivotal change in a short period of time, and that's a good change. It's a change in the right direction. Now there's a lot more we could talk to them about, but there's still, you said there about sort of sizing up, Colin, and with size probably comes lower sustainability. This is where my sort of worry comes in. You know, my master's was food security, and food security is, you know, physical and economical access to everyone, a safe, nutritious food that meets dietary requirements and preferences. It's getting food to everyone. We produce enough food, right, for about 12.3 billion. The issue is the infrastructure, getting it to them, and so on and so forth. But do we produce enough food? Now, this is going to be a contentious question for especially this group of people. Do we produce enough food if we don't have large-scale farming, on the basis that not everyone is going to do what you're saying, Colin? Not everyone's going to live in a community. Not everyone's going to produce their own food. Not everyone's going to produce just for those around them. Do you see what I mean? Do we still have a working system that those working in farming sort of, I think it would be fair to say that the sort of system you're in, Evie, is quite uncommon. You know, for the most part, generating an income because that's required and still feeding the planet. I'm quite interested to hear, I see a lot of hands up. Whoever first wants to go for it.
I hope you've kicked your feet up and got comfy and enjoying another fantastic episode of the R2Kast with another really interesting guest. I would just like to quickly take another second to plug the sponsors of the show today, the Scottish Farmer, and I would strongly advise you to go out and pick one up this week and see even more of the fantastic people that are in our industry.
Right, I come in.
Fire on.
To answer your question, I don't know. But if we don't farm and grow trees in this way, then we're going nowhere. If we carry on using oil as we are at the moment, then we've got 50 years. That's not me saying that. That's, you know, what is predicted. It's less than 50 years.
Yeah.
Years ago it was 50 years. Now we can make all sorts of adjustments, but whatever, that's incredibly finite. Incredibly finite. So our agricultural production now, how things are being grown, is totally dependent on that. Totally. The fertilizers are either derived from it or use massive amounts of it to be produced. Mm-hmm. So if we cut the world's use of oil in half, you might have 100 years. If you manage to sort of ease back on that and work away at that, it's still unsustainable. We need to transition, and we need to find our way so that we are producing our food sustainably, and this is a way of doing it. You know, it will need to be developed, improved, but whatever, we need to be doing it. I personally think there's no alternative other than if you're looking at George Monbiot and huge fermentation vats controlled by wealthy corporations producing our food, and I don't see that as being at all desirable. I don't know about the sustainability of it, but our agriculture and land use at the moment is, by definition, because of its reliance on petrochemicals, unsustainable.
Just before you jump in there, Abby, I think that's put very well, Tim. What is sort of between your point and Colin's point is, because I think from a realistic perspective, there's not a way forward where there's enough producers, and I could be wrong here, producing on that sort of small scale for what's nearby. It's what I want. I spoke about it a lot in the Masters. I really like that idea, but I still think it's an ideology. So and again, jump in and say you disagree, if so, because that's fine. It's what this is about. Is there a way for us to do this and have producers do it on a large scale to meet that food requirement while also doing it? Because you sort of said with size, Colin, that disappears. But sorry, Abby, I know you were going to say something.
Yeah, interestingly, I also did my master's in food security.
Yes,
it was. I think mine was through Bangor University. So it was farming focused, really, grasslands and soil management and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Is it possible to scale it up? Well, yeah. Look at ranchers in the States who are farming over thousands of hectares in Australia. So that there is definitely they're operating on a scale in quite intensive regenerative systems that are working. But I think what this comes down to is changing our diets as much as anything else, and changing our farming to reflect the change of diets that are needed. Obviously, I'm a vegetable producer.
For sure, yeah.
I would like to have cattle. I really would love to have cattle, and everybody in this group knows that I'm just a farmer stuck in a gardener's body. But we need more vegetables in our diets. We do need more. We need to eat more plants. In fact, that we do need to eat more plants, and we need to be producing sort of crops for human consumption on grounds that can produce crops for human consumption. We also need to produce crops for animal consumption, and Collins talks about sort of the diets for poultry and pigs and that kind of thing. But that obviously needs to change and shift away from soya, from deforestation of the Amazon as well. So it is so complex. It's all really complex, isn't it? It's the whole thing. But I think that the yields are possible, but we need to change our farming systems to reflect the dietary changes that are needed. Sustainable Food Trusts came up with a really good report called Feeding Britain last year. They published a summary of that in December just this year, and that's kind of worth having a look at, looking at, okay, what do we need to change to feed ourselves sustainably as a nation? How does our farming need to change to reflect the dietary changes that are going to be needed to have a more sustainable existence, or to exist on this planet? Because as Tim said, we don't have any choice. The writing is on the wall. So we have to do this, or we haven't got any future for our great grandchildren. That's the bottom line.
I I think that's very fair. And one thing that I think, how do I say this? Looking at sustainability and that sort of thing, just in general, I think we're quite guilty of trying to come up with a one size fits all. Whereas what people in, I'm from Arran, a hilly island, we produce beef, lamb, and a little bit of feed barley. Yeah, that's what's produced there. So from a diet perspective and from an environmental perspective, what makes sense to eat is that. Let's forget human nutrition. Let's look at it from an environmental perspective entirely for a minute. That makes more sense. If you're in Ukraine, or if you're in, Zargoth Mountains, whatever, these places are very fertile. That makes more sense to a different diet. And I think it's quite important to consider that. Colin, what I will say, Colin, is I'm quite conscious of time, but let's hear what you're saying, because I do want to ask you all a question at the end as well. But that doesn't mean don't say what you're saying. Please say what you're saying.
No. It was all just very interesting. I mean, I'd heard that. I mean, you may know this fact, and Abby may know this fact better than me, but I'd heard that we produce enough calories in 20% of the world's farmland to feed the whole world. If you look at it from a calorie perspective, I've never found a paper that backs it up or whatever, but I've heard that, and it all just seems, because we always talk about, we need to produce food en masse.
But that'll be an extremely intensive 20%. Sorry to interrupt you there, but it will be calories, but it'll be against everything that you guys are standing for.
And not nutrition either. We're not talking about nutrition there.
Yeah, just enough calories.
That was the point I was going to make. That if your soil's healthy, the food you produce is healthier, and you actually need less of it. You might think you still need the same amount to eat, but if the food itself is more nutritious because it's grown on better soil, whether that's vegetables, meat, or whatever, you actually don't need as much food because the nutrition is more concentrated. If that makes sense.
Yeah, well, I think it's quite important. I ran off the food security definition like a nerd there, but the important thing that I always focus on is, environmental and physical access, perfect, grand, for everyone, to safe, nutritious food, perfect. But the important part is that sort of nutritious dietary requirements and preferences. It's not just this idea of, dropping a ton of tatties on a random village. It's actually giving them what's required to have a balanced diet. So, calorific wise, Colin, I wouldn't be surprised. Probably you could look at some intensive wheat places knocking the sort of record yields of like your 16, 17 tons a hectare. Mentally intensive system in Lincolnshire or Australia or the States or whatever, or a heavily intensive feedlot, which I think is the most ridiculous thing on the planet, but as a thing.
I think that was the point that was getting made with the 20%, was we need to stop saying that we need to produce so much food because we just want people to feed it. It was more about, we need to produce, like Irene was saying, the nutrient density, and it's what do we produce, not how much do we need. We're obsessed with quantity and we're obsessed with yield. We just broke the world yield record for wheat this year. I think it was something like 70. What was it, like 7.8 tons or 8 tons an acre or something like that? 17. 17.
I don't think they've hit 18 per hectare yet. Yeah.
No, it was 17, but a massive, just an English. It was in England as well, wasn't it? I think so.
It's a wheat trailer.
But I'd love to see the nutrient density testing of all these. Go and test that for nutrient density. I'd love to see how it stacks up against a heritage wheat that's not producing. You probably find you would need 17 tons for 2 tons of, exaggerating.
Yeah, I think this is I'm trying to be conscious of time here, and I'm going to open a completely new can of worms. But a lot of people have gluten intolerance and such like and whatnot, and that's because of intensification of a product. Yeah, that's a massive reason. I do still think we need to, like we're saying about the factory produced, it's 12.3 billion, enough for 12.3 billion, but we waste about 34.5%. So that's now taken us to pretty much where we are. Yeah, that sort of 8 billion, it's a wee bit higher than that it takes us to. So we need to work on that more than food, yeah. And if when we're working on that infrastructure, if we can try and increase the regenerativeness and sustainability of that product, all the better. And for those listening, we've probably been saying regenerative and whatnot, and you're probably thinking, what does that mean? We could go into what regenerative farming means. There's not really a strict definition. It's sort of looking at soil health and whatnot. But the best description I ever heard was a sustainable relationship is one in which you come home from work, you make dinner, and you go to bed. But a regenerative relationship's when you come home from work and you get your wife some chocolates and flowers, and then whatever happens later is much better. But that's the sort of difference between sustainable and regenerative, and I actually thought it's a really good way of describing it. Conscious of time, we're sitting at an hour and a half, and I do want to ask all of you 2 questions. I also think, Abby, you probably want to say a little thing about sort of how Regenerative Farming Network, Sustainable Food Partnership, and that sort of thing is funded, how that occurs as well. So let's go with that.
Should I just do that right now? Yeah, I should have said that right at the beginning. But the Soil Health Group is currently funded by the Scottish Government's Knowledge Transfer Innovation Fund. And this group is part of a Scotland-wide project in partnership with Nature Friendly Farming Network, Pasture for Life, Land Workers Alliance, Soil Association Scotland, and Nourish, who are all co-hosting knowledge sharing groups like this in different parts of Scotland. And they've been on lots of farm walks and had their own webinars, one of which John mentioned earlier, the High Nature Value, which was hosted by Kirsty and Phil from Nature Friendly Farming Network. This concludes later in March, when I think Hugh and Tim and Evie and Colin are all going to Edinburgh to a parliamentary event to meet with other farmers who've been part of this knowledge transfer innovation fund. It's called Agroecology Enabling the Transition, and they're going to get to meet with MSPs and hammer them with policy asks. So that's going to be quite exciting. Yeah. So yeah, I need to get that in because it's kind of important.
Well, you know, when you mentioned the nature, I always say this wrong. I always say nature friendly farming network.
Yeah,
you know, that's right. That's not normally. We're revalidating our whole degree at the minute, the agriculture course. The HNCs at the minute are the first of their kind into the next gen. It's sort of integrating vocational assistance, so going out on work placement and more integration of practical and whatnot. And we're just looking at revalidating the HND, and they'll jump into that. And we had this sort of stakeholders day and whatnot, and we had Michael Clark from Nature Friendly Farming. Yep, got there. And it was really interesting, sort of probably a perspective that we quite often don't get at these things, and I'm really glad we had it. It was very worthwhile. So I have a question for everyone, because we're sitting at over an hour and a half at the minute, so it's been a good one, and it flies by when there's more people. Actually, I've really enjoyed the sort of dynamic. If you were to say, well, I'll tell you what, I'll give you the easy one first, but I'll give you them both at the same time, and we'll go around. Where do you see yourself, and let's put it as yourself, let's not focus on the actual group at the minute, in 5 years? And also, if you had to explain, and we'll do this quickly because of time, let's say, if you had to explain in 30 seconds to a minute what the Regenerative Farming Network was, how would you do it? So again, we'll go round in the order of how I see it. Let's start with yourself, Hugh.
5 years' time, gosh, that's a crystal ball question, isn't it? Thanks for that one. I think I would like to see myself in a position where I'm much more enriched as a person, much more considerate in my actions in life, and holistic land management has helped me do that. So I think treading lightly, being conscious, being respectful to other people, and I guess giving myself better values and higher standards to step up to, and hopefully I'll still be around in 5 years' time. That's what I should have said.
That was so deep.
It is.
Treading lightly to reduce compaction. I mean, like, you know, what more could you look for? And if you were to sum up Regenerative Farming Network in a quick thing, how would you do it?
Yeah, look, great. I'm having a great time being part of the group, and you know, these things like these podcasts are brilliant. Everybody works hard. Abby works incredibly hard. And just be great to see it succeeding. And you know, the key thing is as well as enjoying it, you know.
100%. It's got to be the first thing, hasn't it? You know,
yeah, absolutely.
You're not doing it. John, 5 years and a quick description of the Regenerative Farming Network.
You're muted.
5 years. Well, only the good die young, so I'll be here for years. So I should still be around in 5 years' time. Where I'll be, I don't know. I really don't know. I'm hoping it's somewhere along the nature-friendly route, following regenerative practices that I find are so interesting. I'm totally with everybody that thinks it's the way forward. I'm almost stuck on that it's the only way forward, but I'm also aware that there might need to be a flexibility where it needs tweaked to suit us all individually. So it's a general direction rather than a guru-esque you must. I have a great dislike for rules. I hate rules.
You hate yourself.
I've always hated rules, and that I hopefully still here, hopefully doing a better job than I'm doing now with the help of everybody here and others. And well, that's it.
No, good stuff. Like it. Colin?
In 5 years, God, I don't know. I think I always look at the future in terms of tree growth and what the farm will look like in terms of elevation and height. So I'd be interested just to see what the farm looks like in 5 years, where the trees were planted and stuff, and how I think it'll be really interesting to just see the actual physical shape change of a farm. When I go to places where the trees have started to grow and they get a bit denser, it makes me feel happier, if kind of been able to walk through grassland and forest and at the same time. So yeah, that's pretty much that. Healthier soils, a bit more biology, more fungi, basically, that's what we're aiming for. The network, the best thing I like about the network is quite literally just the like-minded community. You can go there and you can vent about all the conventional stuff if you want. Just speaking with others. Farming is such a lonely place. Even when you've got lots of friends and stuff, you're out there and a lot of time you're slogging away yourself, and frustrations are with no one else but yourself, and you've got to deal with them, and you forget to vent. Sometimes you forget to, speak out about them, and even just talking with other farmers about, the kind of things you want to talk about. It's just relaxing things. So yeah, that's the best thing about it.
I think it's a massive part from a mental health perspective. We're in quite a worrying place sometimes in food production, that because you're not in big companies, you're not in staff intensive units, I actually struggled with it hugely. The times I did night lambings and stuff, I really struggled with it. I'm a pack animal, like I'm not good myself yet. And big thing. When COVID happened, we lost shows and markets and this sort of thing, and it's useful for that. Abby?
So in five, I've got David Bowie in my head now. 5 years.
I never get the music.
5 years. What a surprise. Anyway, no, right, never mind David Bowie. I'll be, I will have got a sort of cooperatively owned farm by that point. Probably a small farm, about 50 acres, with a 2-acre market garden, and a burgeoning silver pasture agroforestry system with beautiful hedgerows on the way anyway, because 5 years obviously isn't very long, but there will be beautiful hedgerows and orchards, and cattle, of course. Probably Shetlands. I'm a bit hung up on Shetlands, just because they're dual purpose and you can milk them as well. So enterprise stacking with a micro dairy and some pastured poultry. Why not? Because we need more broilers, that's for sure. Not just eggs. There's a massive demand for free range organic chicken, and people who will pay for it as well. So yes, all the things, but in a low impact agroecological kind of way.
I must have asked over 90 people that question, and no one has had such an accurate answer.
you got to have a vision,
Almost like a description of what's here now. Like, how did you do that?
God, I wish. Yeah, it's a bit of a pipe dream, but yeah, that's what I want. That's what I want. I'm with a group of people, not on my own, just so we're not all lonely and crying and sad by ourselves. Because you can't do all that by yourself. It takes a community to make that kind of thing happen.
Yeah.
And the Regen Farm Network. I mean, it's just like exploded in the last year, particularly. It's like been of all the things I do lots of kind of food for sustainable food projects, food education, working with kids, looking at food footprints, where the food comes from, and obviously the market garden, and I work with kind of procurement people looking at how we can get more local food and supply chains. And we had an abattoir meeting yesterday looking at infrastructure locally for private kills and small scale sort of direct to customer kind of sales. Well, that's and policy stuff, and I do all this kind of stuff. This is my favorite thing. This is like, I love this project more than anything else. So even if there wasn't any funding for it, I'll still carry on doing it.
She says as she's in her daughter's flat more than anything else. It's quite clear though, Abby. I mean, like it was a very good ex-student of mine, Clara, that came and mentioned this to me, and I've not been involved at all. I hold my hands up, but I look at those Tuesday bulletins every time. Like, I'm normally out a walk when they're sent, and I'll look through it and maybe not click on every link, but the amount of work that goes into that from your end is insane. So
it's not as much as you think, actually. People always say this, but like I'm on various newsletters, Sustainable Food Trust and Agroecology and like Soil Association and Land Workers Alliance, and then I'm on Twitter, obviously, and kind of I'm harvesting interesting information, and then these guys will share stuff via the WhatsApp group, so I'll kind of look that up and save that, and then when it comes to Tuesday, I'm literally just copying and pasting links and a bit of text. It's about an hour.
But fair, and I think probably folks say the same thing to me about this podcast. It must take you forever, but it really doesn't. So yeah, you may be right, but it certainly looks like there's a lot in there, and I don't think I've ever written an email as big as any of them. So you probably saw my emails. I think the longest one I sent you was 7 words. I'm not sort of trying to get what I need done, and that's it. I hate waiting on these things all the time. So Tim, where do you see yourself in 5 years, and a short description of the I can't get this in my head now, Regenerative Farming Network?
Well, in 5 years' time, I hope I've got deeper, richer soil, and I hope, just kind of merging the two things together, I also hope that in 5 years' time, I'll still be laughing at the jokes on the WhatsApp group.
Look, I need this WhatsApp group. You know that. I feel like it is.
You get lots of pictures of John's sheep.
or not John's sheep.
Oh.
Invading sheep.
Or not John's sheep sometimes, yes.
Sorry, Tim. Carry on.
And so the network, I just find it inspiring and supportive, and stepping sideways again, and humorous. So there we go.
I think it's and like you mentioned that as well, Colin. Like, that's such an important part. I think when we start things, we sometimes forget that there's more than just the sort of tangible technical goal you're aiming for. Like you've got a great group of folk here now, and like you can see that is good. Evie.
Oh yes. What's this? 5 years time.
5 years.
They tell me I won't be alive, but if I am alive, I'll have really deep, wonderful, living, regenerated soil on the land. I'll still be growing my onions. I'll still be growing all my salad greens in the polytunnel. I'm never ever bored with it. I'll be doing even more green manure and hugelkultur, and my mushroom bed will be fantastic. Maybe I'll have a Jersey herd if I take this plunge. And meanwhile, all the work that Walter Yen is doing, the whole of the northern hemisphere will be re-green, and all these deserts will become green. And so there may be a chance. And meanwhile, capitalism has just burst itself out of its own hole. I don't care. It's just like a big pustule. And and it's gone, and we can all start growing local food and eating food in season. And just like most of the people do on the planet, have small farms and produce lots of food for the folk around them. I listened to an amazing talk, Andhra Pradesh to Africa, on the Oxford Yield Farming Conference. So, you know, this is happening. People are getting back into what they call natural farming or natural agriculture, whether it's regenerative, it's all the same in a way. And I just think it could be amazing. And that's what I'm holding on to, because the other side of me thinks that we're FUCKEV. But I think, like Tim says, there is no choice. We have to farm regeneratively, and it's probably better to be positive than negative. And this regenerative farming group is a hoot. They've all been incredibly generous with their knowledge, because I'm incredibly ignorant about a lot of things. They all helped me a lot recently when I was needing some figures for, you know, real business. So there's a lot of wisdom in this group. I think it's great, actually. It's really good. I'm enjoying it. And I also, you know, we had a Land Workers Alliance get together here the other week, and that was great too. So there's a lot of people, you know, locally who are quietly getting their shit together, and I like that. It's exciting.
You know, yeah, I love all you said there. I mean, one thing that I think is quite funny is you should never judge a book by its cover, because this is the 82nd episode of the R2Kast, and there's been 2 times people have said the F word, and you've matched that yourself. And I did not think when you came on the call that would be what you'd be doing. So I'm very impressed. You just don't judge a book by its cover.
My daughter gave me a badge, and it said something like really sweary but highly articulate, and that was my birthday present. It's on my something or other. I'm a sweary woman. I'm sorry. I hope that doesn't lose you a few listeners.
Oh dear, worth it. Absolutely. And not at all least this time, it's not Tim this time, and but you are last, unfortunately. Irene, what about yourself? Where you see yourself in 5 years, and information about the Regenerative Farming Network? I got it that time without looking.
5 years' time. Well, one of the things I hope to get out of regenerative, better grazing, planned grazing, that is actually to reduce a lot of the reliance on its animal health, to reduce their reliance on mostly flucicides here. We don't have a worm problem, but we do have a fluke problem. And that is one of the things that I really want to get out of it. I mean, I'm quite happy with my 100 sheep and my 20 cows and my goat. And I wish it was a wee bit easier to make a living from that. But on the other hand, there's a lot going forward around here with local food networks and buying direct short supply chains. I was at a meeting with Abby the other night about exactly that, trying to shorten supply chains. And I think that's actually beneficial for everybody, all for community. Even if it's not community owned, producing for the community rather than sending it off into the blue yonder and not knowing what enough happens to it. The sort of things with the abattoirs and that. I hate the fact that if I actually sell goats in the market, I know they're going to Birmingham, they're going to halal, and I don't want that. And I've actually not sold any that way for quite some time, which has resulted in a bit of a backlog in a build, which is not financially good.
Is that why it's 56 and not a bit less? So.
Partly yes. Partly yes. But I was speaking to Paisley Abattoir today, and that I might hopefully take it out to 46 or something. You never know. But I just don't think that's right, that food should be going so far when there's people that need it here. Why should it go down there to come back up? Or why should it go across to Germany and then we bring German pork back in instead? It's silly.
I agree. And I think there's a lot of this sort of, I see Tim's going. Thank you, Tim.
Hi, Tim.
We'll see you later on. You know, this sort of idea of almost looking down on a product. I spoke to a guy, Regis Umajuraneza, R2Kast number 71, and he's the food and farming policy chairperson for Rwanda. And they have readily available sweet potato. And those people that are poor beyond sort of what we can really comprehend in this country don't eat sweet potato because it's frowned upon. And I'm like, that's insane. And this idea that we've got that here, that goat's probably one that a lot of, I would say, my friends, a lot of folk I know that'll be like, oh, goat. And I'm like, oh, goat. And sort of changing that perception is a massive part of this. And the fact that there's so many different forms of protein and energy that we can take in, and it doesn't always have to be the norm. And we can sort of change that norm. But honestly, guys, it's been an absolute pleasure to chat. I've very enjoyed this. It's been one of those sort of ones where I'm sort of always checking the watch to make sure we're getting time and whatever, and we're now pretty much 2 hours. It's kind of went like that. So thank you all very much for your time. I've fair enjoyed it. I hope you guys have enjoyed yourself as well.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yep. Thank you. Well, it's really good.
Grand. I'm glad. For those of you listening, that was R2Kast number 82. Next week, or not words apparently I can't do that anymore. Not next week. This week, come Friday, we'll have Charles Dowding on, which is very exciting. And then next week, we're jet setting off to, I've forgotten now, that's terrible, Zimbabwe, to speak to Blythe Aitken, who is a flower and blueberry agronomist out there. So very interesting chat. She is actually from Dumfries and Galloway. Well, that's not true. She's born in Zimbabwe, spent a lot of her sort of teenage years and sort of studied in Dumfries and Ayrshire, in fairness, and is now back in Zimbabwe. And then the following week, we'll have the Digital Dairy Chain on, which is the big fancy, I can explain it, big funded dairy digital chain. Listen to R2Kast 85, it's not filmed yet, you can hear it better what it means then. So yeah, thank you very much, and we'll see you for the next one. Thank you all, everyone, as well. Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
I hope you've enjoyed another excellent episode of the R2Kast. I just want to take this moment to quickly thank our primary sponsors once more, A-Plan Rural. If you follow A-Plan on social media, you'll see the work they're doing to really promote British farming and back our industry. It's been a pleasure working alongside A-Plan Rural so far, and long may it continue. The values of A-Plan Rural runs perfectly in line with the whole mantra of rural to kitchen, and I'm glad to have them on board. Check them out on Instagram at A-Plan Rural and on Facebook at A-Plan Rural Insurance. See you for the next podcast.